Welcome to the Korea Society and welcome to Studio Korea. My name is Nikita Desai, Director of Policy and Corporate Programs at the Korea Society, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to today's program, Korea and Startups. This particular program follows on an earlier program that we did looking at Korean entrepreneurship and global reach, where we had Bernard Moon, founder of Spark Labs, and David Chu, founder and CEO of Nori. We're very pleased to welcome today's speaker, David Lee, founder and CEO of Shakr Media. Shakr Media is based in Seoul and San Francisco. He has built an international development team in Seoul while raising $2.75 million in venture capital with both Korean and US investors, including NHN Investment and 500 startups. Under David's leadership, Shakr has appeared as a presenter at TechCrunch, Disrupt Startup Battlefield in Beijing, and has earned top honors at B Launch 2013 in Seoul and B Global 2013 in Palo Alto. So please join me in welcoming David today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here in New York City for my first time ever.
So why Korea? This is, the point. I read an article where you were a strong proponent, and you were saying that Korea is a really great place to grow startups, and we wanted to bring you in. What are the factors that make it so conducive for startups to flourish in Korea?
Korea, it has a ton of great things going for it. I chose to do this startup in Korea. I was thinking, do I want to move to Ireland, the UK, or down to Silicon Valley? I was in Toronto at the time, and I thought Korea is the place to do it. I grew up with my father telling me about the work ethic in Korea, and at the time I was starting to get disillusioned with the work ethic where I lived in general. I think there was a sense of complacency and that hunger, the fire in your belly. That was something that I felt was missing around me, and so I went to Korea looking for that, and Korea's got that in spades. People are hungry. There's this desire to get substantially better. Korea is now a great place. It's a great place to live with modern amenities. You've got great restaurants, and it's phenomenal. But despite the good life that people have there, people are still hungry. And I think that's just part of the DNA. What Korea really has going for it is the people. In Korea, we've got an incredibly highly educated workforce, a workforce educated to a high standard. I heard from a number of people, and I expected going there initially, this would be an issue and an opportunity. The best and the brightest of Korea were going to work for some of the biggest companies in Korea. It's the prescribed way of life with the prescribed results. But today, what I see is an increased appetite for risk-taking and a longer view of things. What I see is an opportunity to take the best and the brightest and tell them a different story. They're very open to it. We're very open to it in Korea. And if we tell them that different story, the story of what a startup can do for your life today and what it can do for your career in the long run, whether or not the startup works out, the doors that it opens for you, and then what happens if the startup does work out for you. I think that, and what I've seen and experienced personally, is that the best and the brightest at some of the biggest companies in Korea today, in their late 20s, early 30s, they're very interested in joining the best and the brightest startups.
With the aspect that you mentioned, risk-taking, is that something that you think can be learned, or is that an innate ability that one just grows to want to be, a creative thinker, a leader, a risk taker? Is that something that you can become, given the pedagogical system of the Korean schools?
I think of myself actually as many people will tell me, Dave, you're such a risk taker. You're always willing to roll the dice. I don't gamble at Vegas or anything like that, but they say, Dave, you're such a risk taker. You've got this great appetite for risk. But I actually think of myself as a pretty paranoid person, worrying about the risks. But being a risk taker, I think what it comes down to is taking a longer view of things and doing the math behind it. Because if you do the math behind it, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to live that prescribed life, go down that prescribed path, and get those prescribed returns, because frankly, for me, the math doesn't work out. I think that we should be given what we put into that kind of life to achieve that kind of life. If you put that same amount or even just a little bit more into finding your own path, there are incredible returns to be had from that. And I want to go back to that what is it that's great for Korea? The people. Boy, it used to be, when I was growing up, Korean immigrant family in Canada, doctor, lawyer, accountant, dentist, engineer maybe. Those were the professions, and that was it. The engineer was a maybe. My parents were a little disappointed when my oldest sister became an engineer. And that was what was expected of me. I think it was my brother's like 11th birthday when my dad gave him an organic chemistry textbook. So today what I see is people growing up aspiring to be not just the best in a profession, but the best in the world, the best in the people growing up looking at Kim Yona and saying, I could be that. People growing up and saying, I can be an Olympic athlete. I think today in Korea, we have many people who say, I am Yona Kim. I can be the best in the world. And the energy that I feel in Korea, the sheer number of people around me that I see who are thinking, not in the literal sense, but who are thinking, I am Yona Kim. It's mind-blowing, and the energy, it charges us amongst each other. So Korea, the people definitely. But beyond the people, Korea's got some of the other pieces as well, things like infrastructure. Wow, we hear this over and over again, but internet speeds. I take it for granted. Whenever so I spend about 2 weeks a month in Korea and 2 weeks a month here in the US, and every time I come back, I take it for granted. Wow, Korean internet is a lot faster, and it does make a difference. It's available everywhere, and it's just fast wherever you go. So that's good and important. The way that the government is actively going out of its way to not get in the way, and the way that the government is actively trying to contribute. Whether or not they make a contribution, I think, is irrelevant, because I think it's that mindset that makes sure that they don't get in the way. And that means a lot to me. It means a ton to me. We've also received some help from the government. So they had a program in place from, I think, 3 years ago or so, 2 years ago, angel matching funds. If an angel investor puts money into your company, the government will match it. So we turned a single angel investor's $200,000 investment into our company into $400,000. And that was the government that doubled that investment. And that means a lot, because for a startup, each round of funding that you go to do, regardless of how low intensity the fundraising might be, it still takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of work. And that's energy that I think should be put towards product and traction. And so we really appreciate that from the Korean government.
This initiative by the government heavily was promoted by Park Geun-hye in 2013 with this idea of creative economy. So talking about innovation in chaebols versus innovation in startups and small medium enterprises, how do you see innovation? Is it different when it's in a chaebol, or is it differently applied for startups and SMEs?
Well, I read an article recently about the vice chairman of CJ Entertainment, and it made me feel good about large companies in Korea, how we continue to aspire to not just be incrementally better, but many times better. How this young lady imagined that Korea's entertainment industry could become a global powerhouse. And with the resources behind her, she was able to actually accomplish just that. She transformed, or not just transformed, but created out of nothing this giant entertainment machine, where today you can go to when I first arrived in Korea, you go to a movie theater and it was a pretty crummy experience. Today you go to a movie theater and it's fine dining in front of a silver screen. You can get these beautiful sofas, and it's just like any other very global large city in the world today. World-class entertainment options, world-class theater productions being brought to Korea, and world-class theater productions being made in Korea, world-class movies being made in Korea. So I think chaebol, or large companies in Korea in general, still have that entrepreneurial hunger, it feels like. And on top of that, they've got this great thing going for it. Eric Ries's Lean Startup Machine, he talks about the Lean Startup methodology, he talks about iteration. I think that's embedded into Korean culture in general, the desire to get something out there first. And one way that that's been described is 빨리, get something done quick. I don't think that tells the full story, because there's the 빨리, getting it done first, quick, based upon a hypothesis, and then there's the iteration that comes after it. We've seen it. We were talking about Samsung earlier. We've seen Samsung do it over and over again. We saw them doing it with MP3 players. We've seen Samsung do it with smartphones even today. The market share of the Galaxy class of smartphones by Samsung, wow. So this iterative approach that's imbued into Korean culture, I think, is very well suited to startup thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same with big companies and small companies. They all
Mm-hmm.
have that iterative thinking built into them.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the startups and looking at, startups that are sort of mimicked, Groupon here and Ticket Monster in Korea. You have, WhatsApp here, Kakao Talk and Line. So can you talk a little bit about that and what makes these companies really thrive, in the domestic market?
So I've had the opportunity to watch Ticket Monster. One of their very first pitches, I was sharing the stage with Dan Shin, the CEO of Ticket Monster, and he went right after I presented, and his presentation was talking about, he was pitching, including Dave McClure from 500 Startups was in the audience that day, how he would do essentially what the pitch boiled down to was Groupon for Korea. And he talked about why Korea was the right place for this kind of play. And his company was acquired by Living Social for over $300 million in stock, and then later was then acquired by Groupon. So they were acquired twice, and by competitors at that. So when I looked at Ticket Monster, that's when my thinking about this mimicking of non-Korean businesses for the local market, that's when my thinking on that issue changed, because what I saw was phenomenal execution and iteration to the point that they got just the right solution for the local market. And I saw Ticket Monster become one of the very few, the handful, literally handful, of startups in the world that were doing social commerce that became profitable. How was it possible? I thought. And I looked at the way he was running his business, his approach to some of the fundamentals, and the way he drilled that down every single day. And I thought, wow, this commitment to execution, this commitment to operational excellence, this commitment to iteratively getting to something better, it works. And I thought that was perfectly timed to one of the other observations I made about startups in Korea. Startup founders in Korea, there are many that, until this current generation of startup founders, that just didn't have global thinking. Sure, they could speak English maybe, some of them, but they didn't have global thinking as a part of their DNA. Regardless of if they went and spent a year abroad for a gap year, they still didn't have global thinking as part of their DNA. And so we saw a lot of, questionable apps come out. We saw some uncomfortable apps come out that were very awkwardly worded, things like that. And it was that cultural disconnect that I think it made a lot of Korean startups have some difficulty going global. Today, I see many startups that are global from the get-go because the young generation of Koreans today, whether or not they set foot outside of the Korean country, they are still global-minded. They have that global DNA because Seoul is an incredibly global city today. You've got some of the world's best of everything accessible to everybody in Seoul. And in some ways, some of the, just like I think many New Yorkers will say, some of the best in the world accessible to them right there at home. So with that global thinking available now, Korean startups are able to make a go of it from the beginning without having to look at what's happening in another company in another country. Back when Ticket Monster was starting, and I know it doesn't sound like a long time ago, but things changed very quickly in Korea. So back when Ticket Monster was starting, I think many Korean companies still needed that base of something to overcome the cultural awkwardness of not having that global thinking as part of your DNA. So being able to look at what's already working abroad and then just doing it better, that's something that Korean companies were very good at. But today, I think that doesn't necessarily hold true because we see this great crop, this great generation of young Koreans that have global thinking as part of their DNA. They're able to come up with innovative ideas, make a go of it. Maybe their businesses do overlap with other businesses elsewhere, but that wasn't the intention from the beginning. They start from ground zero, and I think that's a testament to the growth of Korea as a country.
Thank you so much. Lastly, I'd just like to ask you, what are some challenges that you see? for startups that are trying to thrive? I mean, are there domestic factors that could be obstacles, or what are some obstacles that startups tend to run into in Korea?
I think that in general, acquisitions in Korea, local acquisitions are very small. I was very surprised when I heard about some of the figures for some of the companies of friends of mine that have sold their companies, and the numbers are very small, and so it makes the game smaller. Um, but I don't think that that's really an insurmountable obstacle, because today, if you take a global view of things from the beginning, there are opportunities to look beyond your own country. And I think, for example, that's one of the reasons why, in fact, I think that is being able to, not necessarily for M&A, but in general, being able to tap into some of the biggest and the best companies in the world. I think that the best practices for engaging with smaller companies, it feels healthier between big companies and smaller companies, that relationship dynamic here in North America as opposed to in Korea. We've had our Shakr has had its string of, courtships with some of the bigger companies in Korea. And I've always been the first to take a step back, because I think that it's not the kind of relationship dynamic that I'm looking for. There's in Korean we say kap that the big company, small company relationship. And I think, for example, when signing our first investment contract, I actually asked that I didn't insist, but I asked and discussed the idea of replacing kap-ul with something else, because I didn't want that kind of paradigm to be in an investment into our company. That's a serious relationship. These guys are now our shareholders, and I want to be able to hold my head up high, and I want them to hold their head up high when we're engaged with each other, and I want them to feel proud of their relationship with me, just as I feel proud of my relationship with them. And so I was actually incredibly honored that they would change that, because I know that that's just the way it's done in Korea. But the kap-ul was changed, and we're seeing a lot of that starting to change now. So I don't think it's an insurmountable obstacle at all. And at the end of the day, we also have the option of not doing business with the local companies. We could always do business abroad as well.
One final question I would like to ask is, for all aspiring entrepreneurs, what is your one, nugget of wisdom that you've learned through the years, and that you would give this piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs?
I've heard storytelling as a very important piece of advice, and I took that to heart. But recently, I've come to realize that it's not just storytelling that's important. It's the substance that goes into that. So it's having a story, living a story that's important. And then the storytelling will come naturally. And that's why I tend to not fully agree when people talk about needing to coach or train Korean entrepreneurs to learn how to pitch, because I think a pitch is storytelling. And I think that storytelling comes from the authenticity of having lived that story and being that story. So knowing your story and owning that story, I think, is what I'd share with the people around me.
Well, thank you so much, David. We really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you all for coming tonight. If you're not members, please do sign up for membership. And we hope to welcome you back to our next corporate event. We're going to be talking about the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement at its 2-year anniversary with speaker Tammy Overby from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So really hope to welcome you back. Thank you so much for joining us.